I am your astrologer, Wonder Girl, taking you to new heights. Today, I'm gonna do something a little bit different and take you behind the scenes of how I do my horoscopes, of how I think about my horoscopes, of what all that really goes into making them, and to show you the chart and how I think about the charts that I do use for my weeklies and I'm gonna start to use for my dailies. The reason why I am doing this is because I think it is so important for you to understand this chart, okay? If I get this wrong, what I'm about to show you, then I cannot do your weeklies, then your weeklies will also be wrong. I mean, there's a lot of other things that can also make your weeklies wrong too, but this is like the main component that you need to know and that you need to understand in order to really be able to make accurate predictions and to understand natal charts and then move forward. A matter of fact, it wasn't for me that I really began to learn astrology and to understand astrology until I was taught this bit by bit by watching other people's videos. And so I really want some of you to understand this. Some of you may actually already know this, may already understand it, but I just think it is so important to be able to put all of these pieces together to form a coherent picture, okay? What I'm gonna do for this video as we move forward is that I am going to show you the chart of where all the planets are right now in the sky, and I'm going to walk through that with you to help you better understand what it is that is going on and how it works, okay? Before I do that though, I do want to give you the right perspective on how to think of this chart versus your natal chart, since I know a lot of times when we think about astrology, we think about our natal charts and what we were born with. The way I see this chart is your factory defaults, the one that I'm about to show you. It's what came right out of the factory, okay, that was set up, that God set up, or whoever, you know, whatever. I don't, you know, I'm not here to make judgments about how the world was created, but whatever happened, this is the factory defaults of the way the world works. Now, when you were born, you take the factory defaults that are in the sky and you make them your own. Okay, and you kind of mold it into your own preferences and your own things, okay? I think it's fair to say that when we're born, we don't just come into this world as like boy blanks and girl blanks, you know? I think we have personalities, we have preferences, we have things that we like and tendencies that we do that we didn't always learn from our families. I think we learn a lot from our families, and you can definitely see some of that in the chart, or a lot of that in the chart, but I think some of it too is just natural and inherent and innate to us. Okay, and when I talk about this chart that I'm going to show you, I'm not talking about your preferences that you have as an individual. I'm talking about what came out of the factory and some of the framework behind how astrology works. The way I like to think of it, just to give you a metaphor to help you understand, is when you get, here I'll get mine, when you get an iPhone right here coming out of the factory, it has one thing, and then you start messing with it to change the wallpaper, to change the text settings, to get all your contacts in order, and that is like your chart. Like once you've had your phone and it's all programmed, like that is all you and your challenges and your gifts and your strengths and your weaknesses that you need to work on. But when you have to turn your phone in, or when you get a new phone, all of that disappears and you start all over again without your apps, without all of that stuff going on, and that's what we are going to look at here, okay? So I want you to understand that so that it can help you start to piece all of this stuff together, all right? Another thing to understand before I go into some of the details of the chart, and I really hope that this makes sense and that this really hits home, is that the sky and astrology does have factory defaults, and that these factory defaults are where the signs correspond to the houses, correspond to planets, correspond to body parts, correspond to times of the day, to parts of the year. And you really have to, really helps me is that in order to learn astrology, you have to understand all of that first. So I'm gonna quit talking and I'm gonna show you the chart and start drawing on it here. And what I wanna show you, okay, is this chart, like I said, drawn up for September 2017 here, 8:20 a.m. in Salt Lake City. This is where all the planets are at this time in the sky. All right, the only thing different about this chart is that I have automatically set it to come up with 0 Aries. That's the house system I'm using. That house system always puts Aries 0 degrees right on the ascendant, on the horizon, okay? Now, when I drew this chart up, Aries probably was not on the ascendant, and it was definitely probably not 0 degrees, but I have done this because it helps me to better understand the basics of astrology and the fundamentals and how it works, okay? And in the basics of astrology, Aries is always on the first house. Aries rules the first house. And right here you can tell, because I have this number 1 right here saying Aries is the ruler of the first house. So whenever you think Aries, think the first house. And what does Aries like to do? Aries likes to watch out for itself, you know, and do what it wants and start things. It's the first sign of the zodiac. Make things happen, move things forward, initiate, really make things happen that are close to you and what you want, okay? And that's why the first house rules yourself, it rules your identity, it rules who you are. So whenever you think Aries, think the first house. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on all of the signs. I'm just going to show you the major angles of the chart, but you do need to realize that that is the case, that each of these signs and houses also have a corresponding planet and body part, okay? So Aries rules the first house rules Aries. Aries is ruled by the planet Mars, okay? Aries also rules the head. Okay, and it goes in order in the body parts. So Aries is the head, Taurus is the throat, all right? Gemini, you get like the hands going on here. Cancer's the heart and the chest. Well, Leo is kind of the heart, but Cancer's the chest in a lot of ways. And so you got to understand how each of these things work as you go from there. And if you can get that, the rest is going to make a lot more sense to you as you begin to do all of this stuff. And here's Aries, and you can tell the way I like to think of Aries, in case some of you are having problems remembering the symbols, is by like the little horns on top. I think a ram is a symbol of the Aries, and for some reason this symbol always reminds me of the ram with like the things coming out of the top over here. So that's Aries. On the first house, directly opposite Aries, you will get the 7th house, okay, Libra, which naturally rules the 7th house, which is opposite yourself. What is opposite yourself? Other people. Okay, so you gotta think of them in pairs. You gotta think of things like this. So whenever you think 7th house, think Libra. Whenever you think Libra, think 7th house. Venus rules Libra, think Venus, that kind of thing. Libra also rules the kidneys because it, you know, it digests. Is this right for me? Is this not? Do I want to make this commitment? Is this person, you know, how do I work with this person or this foreign thing that has been in my body? So you have to think a lot in these kind of ways about the astrology. Okay, so that is the major axis right here, the ascendant and the descendant in a chart and how that works. And then you're going to come down here to the IC, the 4th house, which is ruled by Cancer. The way I see this is you've got like the opposite C's coming in, C for Cancer. So that's the way I think of that, and that rules your home life and your family. So whenever you think of Cancer, think of the 4th house, think of home and family, and try to put all that together. Cancers like to be safe, they like to be secure, they like to have a good home life in order, they like to feel like their foundation is in place. So there is that going on. The moon rules Cancer. So when you think of the 4th house in Cancer, you want to think of the moon, which rules your emotional states. And the moon wants to feel safe and secure because it is ruled by Cancer. So there's a lot of that going on there. Another way to think of this too, opposite the 4th house, we have the 10th house over here, and opposite Cancer is the sign of Capricorn, the VS symbol right here. I wish I had a trick for that one. In Libra you can mention because it kind of looks like an equal sign. So you're like an equal partnership in the 7th right here with your Libra, if you can see that. But in the 10th, which is opposite the 4th house of home and family, which is ruled by Cancer, you have Capricorn ruling the 10th house. And that rules your career. What's opposite your home life? Your career. Your home life, you're very private. It's your private life in Cancer, what you like to do behind closed doors. But in Capricorn, it's the highest part of the sky. It's the noontime part of the sky. It's your career. It's how you put yourself out there in a very, very public way. Okay, and so think of all of those things. Saturn also rules Capricorn, rules your career in a lot of ways, taking the dedicated way and approach to presenting yourself to other people and relating all of this kind of stuff together, okay, and figuring some of that stuff out. So keep a lot of that in mind. I also believe, what is it? Capricorn rules your hair and your bones. What else? And your skin, which is kind of an interesting way to think of it, but it comes right after Sagittarius, which rules your thighs and your hips. And what comes after your thighs and your hips? You got these really long leg bones here, so it kind of rules the bones that are there. So those are just some ways to think of it, to go there. Another way to think of it, I know I just touched on this. I said that Capricorn is noontime. It rules the most public part of your life when the sun is at its brightest, at its highest in the sky. So if the sun were there, if it were noontime in your chart, this is what the sign that would be up there, that would be the highest part in the sky, whatever it is. In the defaults, it's Capricorn. Okay, and to think about it that way. So I'm gonna write noon here. Because Capricorn is noon, it's going to make Cancer midnight. So that also helps you think of these signs in different ways. You gotta use all these little tricks, okay, to think about these things and help them stick in your mind, okay? If Cancer is midnight, it's a private part of your life. It's what you do at midnight when no one is around, when no one is watching, when all of your feelings come out, when the moon comes out, because the moon rules Cancer at midnight. What's going on? A lot of times it's things we don't show other people, our emotional stuff that we have because we want to feel certain ways or feel good or feel comfortable. So there's all that. We have Aries, 6 a.m. The beginning of the day, you wake up, want to get things done, make things happen. You know, that's Aries. And you know, 6 a.m. is like when all the productive stuff, you know, I mean, maybe it doesn't for you, but I think in a lot of cultures, it's like 6 a.m. is like the time when all the stuff, when it helps to get work done, to go for it. So think of that with Aries. And then of course, Libra here, 6 p.m. sunset, almost, when your identity is setting. And you have to think now about other people as well. So try to put it in a lot of that perspective. I know some of you who are living in different hemispheres may be like, well, that's not true for me. I live in the southern hemisphere and it's actually the opposite, but I think you need to realize that when the ancient astrologers who were first astronomers, the first astrologers were astronomers, came up with this stuff, they were on the northern hemisphere. So the way that they made sense of everything and the way that they came up with this system was from their perspective and their observations from a northern hemisphere perspective. So that's why all of that corresponds. Another way to think of this too, I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this stuff, is to think about it by seasons. So we have Aries here, first house is spring. When the sun moves into Aries, first day of spring. Okay, so there's that. Also Libra, when the sun moves into Libra, which is coming up very soon, we've got fall, first day of fall. When the sun comes into Cancer, right down here, we've got the summer solstice. And when the sun comes into Capricorn, right here, we've got the winter solstice. So you got to think about it that way. A lot of these things were also built on crops. When people were planting crops back in the day, you would plant in spring. You get all your seeds, you plant your seeds, you begin things, you do what you want to do, you initiate to make a lot of these things happen. And then in summer, you got to tend the crops. You got to make sure that they're okay, that they have everything that they need to be safe and comfortable and to survive, and you know, nurture them along as they grow. Okay, then fall, harvest time. If you want to incorporate Libra with fall and think of each of these signs also as dealing with seasons. Fall is when you're harvesting, when you're seeing, how did I do? Did I take care of this other person? Is this other person okay? Now I've got to, you know, deal with them and make sure that the harvest is good and work with that stuff. And then winter, of course, is when you don't want to plant anything, when it's very hard to plant everything. And you're wondering, did I do my work in summer? Did I nurture everything? Did I do all of this other stuff so that now that I can't plant anymore, I have enough to last me through the winter, so that I can increase my social standing by giving other people food and things that they need that perhaps they didn't plan for as good as I did when everything else was going on? Okay, so you got to think about things like this in that way as you move there, and correlate some of these other things to times as well and to seasons. Because there are about 3 signs in a season here. You've got spring and Aries, and then it covers the first 3 signs, Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and spring, and then you've got summer here, the next 3 signs, with Cancer, Leo, Virgo, fall, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, winter here, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces. So you have to understand that they all kind of work that way and kind of work it out like that, just to help make some of this more clear to you. Now, I think that's all I'm going to go into here in terms of that with the chart. Oh, one other thing maybe I'll mention before I just start talking about the moon and finish up here, is that whenever I say the sun is in a sign here, you need to know, this is where it is right now, the sun's in Virgo, that the earth is always going to be opposite. So the earth is actually going to be right here in Pisces. Okay, because we all know that the sun, we know that the sun doesn't go around us, we go around the sun. Okay, I think that is like common knowledge nowadays, and I think you need to understand that when we say the sun is moving through signs, the sun is not necessarily moving through signs. Okay, we are moving around the sun, and it's our perspective of the sun that is changing. Okay, so if this is the sun here and I am looking, we are the earth, and we are looking at it this way, Cancer is going to be right here, or some other sign. And if I'm right here on the sun and I'm looking at it this way, Capricorn is going to be right here. So when we say the sun isn't a sign, it's really whatever sign is behind the earth and the way that we're, or behind the sun and the way that we're looking at it. Okay, if that makes sense on how that works. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that as well. So that is a big part of it, and I think a big part of the message here when doing these kind of things is to learn the defaults, learn how each of these things work, so that then you can then take them apart and put them together at another time. Okay, so that I think is what I want to go into there with that. Oh, that was the last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. Another important thing to remember is that astrology, as I mentioned earlier, is based on the seasons and not the constellations. I think in astrology we like to think, oh, well, there's a constellation named Leo, so it must mean that a planet is in that constellation, and that is not true, at least not in Western astrology and not for what I do. There are many times where I will tell you that a planet is in Virgo when it is actually still hanging out here in Leo. Okay, the reason for that is because at one time they were correlated. At one time the signs matched up with the constellations, which matched up with the seasons, but since that time, thousands and thousands of years ago, that has shifted, okay? And the reason for that is because the earth has 3 movements. We know of the movement around the sun, okay? We know of the movement where it kind of like just spins on its axis, but it also kind of wobbles like a top. Okay, like this, back and forth, and it's a very slow wobble, so we don't feel it, we don't see it, and it takes thousands of years for it to even like tilt a little bit, but it's something that does happen, and as a result, the seasons and the constellations and where the planets are have disassociated and are no longer with each other anymore. And so that's why the seasons, or why the signs are not correlated with the constellations. It's also the reason why our North Star is going to change, in case some of you didn't know that. Right now our North Star is a star called Polaris, but in a few thousand years the Earth is going to tilt and it's going to be another star somewhere else called Gamma Cephei. That's going to be our North Star. It's going to be north to us where we were at the time, but it's not north right now, but it will be then, if that makes sense. So those are a lot of the reasons why things have shifted, and in Western astrology we use the seasons. There are some branches of astrology that do not use the seasons and use the planets actually in the constellations that they are in, and are based on the constellations, but the astrology that I do is not based on the constellations. Okay, so that's what I want to tell you there. Now I'm going to go into the moon really quick and explain to you how that works, because it is the moon that I do follow in my daily horoscopes. The reason that I follow the moon is because the moon is very important to us and very close to us in our hearts, I guess, as inhabitants of Earth. Okay, I think it's fair to say that we living on Earth have a very special relationship with the moon. The moon is the closest to us. The moon revolves around us. Okay, so it controls a lot of our tides and a lot of things like that. So we have a special relationship with the moon. That's why I follow it. I'm also a Cancer rising. The moon rules Cancer, so it's important to me. And I think it really helps us figure out what we're focusing on at the moment, our emotions, what is very core to us at the time being, and it moves the fastest in the chart as well. Here it is looking like obviously a moon symbol. So that's why I think it is important. Another reason, or another way I want to explain this, is when I think about the moon, I think about watching a play. You go to a play and you see them switch scenes. They cut in and out of scenes going on here. And when they'll switch scenes, they'll dim the lights, and the lights will dim, and you'll like hear people wrestling in the back, moving things in and out, and then all of a sudden a light will shine, there will be a spotlight, and there will be like some little distraction in the corner that they're trying to use to distract your attention, like a little monologue of some sort or something else. And that's the way I see the moon. There's always stuff going on in the background. Like all these other planets we've got are like always doing something, causing some kind of trouble here. But until the moon comes and shines a light on it, we do not register it fully, or we are not focused on it, or it means nothing to us emotionally in a lot of ways. So the moon gives life to everything else that is going on in the chart, and that's why I always follow the moon in my dailies. I will mention everything else that's going on because we still feel it, but I think the moon is for the most part where most of our focus is. Okay, other things to know about the moon here is that the moon will touch every single sign and every single planet in 28 days. Alright, so the moon goes through all the signs and back to where it started in 28 days. Alright, it's because it goes around the earth. and about that time, I think. And it wants to check up on all the planets and all the signs to make sure that they're all doing okay, to make sure everyone's safe. Cancer is the mother energy, it's the nurturing energy, and to make sure that all of that is fine. As a result, it stays about a little over 2 days in each sign here. And it travels about 13 degrees a day, and it's those 13 degrees a day that I talk about in my dailies. All right, so keep that in mind. What else do I want to talk about? Another thing I want to talk about are the phases of the moon, because I think those are very, very important, especially as a Cancer rising, especially when we talk about new moons and full moons and things like that. Okay, so a new moon, just theoretically, is when the moon starts back at like, well, the new moon here, let me explain it this way, is when the moon and the sun are together in the sky. All right, so when this moon catches up to the sun, which is right here, you're gonna have a new moon. And that's gonna be more or less the beginning of a new 28-day cycle of the moon going through all the signs and coming back again. Now, another way I like to think about it is what else is 28 days, okay? A woman's menstrual cycle, a healthy woman's menstrual cycle is 28 days long, which funnily enough corresponds to the time it takes the moon to go around and back. The moon also rules the 4th house, also rules women in a lot of ways, probably because a lot of these reasons, okay? So you can think of the moon as in a woman's menstrual cycle, okay? Now what happens 2 weeks after a new moon when the moon and the sun are at the same spot? You get a full moon when the moon over here opposes the sun. Okay, a full moon happens 2 weeks after a new moon. What happens 14 days after a woman's period? It's ovulation. It's the most fertile time for her, the best time for her to get pregnant. So if you want to think about a full moon as the most fertile time for you to get pregnant, to really plant some of the seeds, make sure some of the seeds that you planted at the new moon really hold and stick, and to see what they're going to turn into, okay, that's another way that you can think of the full moon when that happens, okay? And then of course, after those 2 weeks, you're on the downswing here until you get your period again, a new cycle starts, and you begin to plant seeds to come around and then see how those seeds take, and then the cycle starts over, okay? So I think it's just really important to figure out and understand how those things work to make sense of astrology and go from there, okay? So I think that's what I'm going to talk about in this video today. I could go into a lot more in the aspects. I might do aspects in another video, but I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. I hope it helped. If you did, please let me know. If you didn't, or you have any more questions, also comment those down below and I'll get back to you. So thank you so much. Hope you have a great day. If you like it, please like it on YouTube, subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, and I will talk to you later.